My boss spent 6 months trying to destroy my career to cover up his affair. He gave away my projects, blamed me for his mistakes, and told HR I was a culture problem. What he didn't know, I had proof of everything, and the day he tried to fire me was the day his whole world came apart. Stick around, because the ending of this story still gives me chills. Let me take you back 2 years. I was a senior analyst at a mid-sized logistics company. 8 years in, spotless record, the person every department called when the numbers didn't add up. I'm not saying that to brag, it matters later. My direct boss, I'll call him Daniel, was the regional director, charming in meetings, ruthless behind closed doors. The kind of guy who said his door is always open while quietly keeping a list of people he didn't like. For most of my time there, Daniel and I were fine. Not friends, but professional. He approved my reviews, I made his department look good. That all changed the night I stayed late to fix a freight reconciliation error. It was a Thursday, almost 9 p.m. The office was empty, or so I thought. I walked past the executive conference room to grab my charger, and through the glass I saw Daniel. He wasn't alone, he was with Vanessa, the VP of procurement. And what I saw was not a business meeting. Here's the thing, Daniel was married. So was Vanessa. And worse, Vanessa's department approved the vendor contracts that Daniel's department submitted. If they were involved, every contract between them was a conflict of interest the company didn't know about. I didn't say a word. I backed out, went home, and decided it was none of my business. Daniel decided otherwise. The next Monday, everything shifted. Daniel called me into his office, smiled, and said the company was rebalancing portfolios. My 2 biggest projects, gone, handed to a junior analyst with 18 months of experience. I told myself it was coincidence. Then my quarterly review came back. Below expectations. First negative review of my career. The examples he cited? Vague. Communication issues. Not a team player. Then came the meeting invites I stopped receiving. The emails where I was quietly dropped from the thread. The client who told me, confused, that Daniel said I'd been transitioned off their account. I want to pause here because if you've ever been managed out of a job, you know this feeling. It's not one big attack. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts, and each one is small enough that you sound paranoid if you complain. But I knew what this was. Daniel suspected I'd seen something that Thursday night. He couldn't ask me directly without confirming it. So he was building a paper trail to discredit me, because if I ever talked, he wanted the record to show a bitter underperformer with an axe to grind. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I stopped playing defense. Here's what I did, and listen carefully, because the order matters. First, I documented everything. Every reassigned project, every dropped meeting, every email where my work was handed to someone else. Dates, times, screenshots, saved to my personal records, not company secrets, just the record of what was happening to me. Second, I went back through the vendor contracts my own analysis work touched. Remember, I was the numbers person, and the numbers told a story. Over 14 months, contracts approved by Vanessa's department had shifted heavily toward 2 specific vendors whose bids were, on average, 11% higher than competitors. Both vendors had been brought in by Daniel, 11%, on millions in freight spend. The company was overpaying by a fortune, and the 2 people approving it were the 2 people I saw in that conference room. Third, and this is the part most people get wrong, I did not confront Daniel. I did not gossip. I did not send an anonymous tip. Anonymous tips get buried. Confrontations get you fired on the spot. Instead, I waited for the right doorway. And Daniel, bless him, built that doorway himself. In March, Daniel went to HR and formally recommended my termination. Performance grounds. He'd spent 6 months building the file and he was confident. HR scheduled what they called a performance conversation. Daniel was there. The HR director was there. And Daniel could barely hide the smirk. He walked them through my decline, the missed expectations, the reassigned projects, which he didn't mention, he had reassigned himself. Then the HR director asked if I had anything to say. I said yes. I opened my folder and I slid 2 documents across the table. The first was my documentation. 6 months of evidence showing every performance issue traced back to decisions Daniel made within days of that Thursday night. The second was the vendor analysis, 14 months of contracts, the 11% premium, the two vendors, and a one-page summary showing the approval chain ran exclusively through Vanessa, with whom I stated calmly Daniel appeared to have an undisclosed personal relationship that I had witnessed firsthand on company property. The room went silent. Daniel's face went grey. The HR director closed her notebook and said the words I'll never forget. I think we need to pause this meeting. What happened next took 5 weeks, and I was interviewed 3 times, not as a problem employee, but as a witness. The company brought in an outside firm to audit the contracts. The audit confirmed what my analysis showed and found more, including expense reports placing Daniel and Vanessa at the same hotels during separate business trips. Daniel was terminated for cause. Vanessa resigned before they could fire her. The 2 vendor contracts were cancelled and rebid, saving the company a number with 2 commas in it. And my below expectations review, formally rescinded and removed from my file with a written apology from HR. But here's my favourite part. Remember that junior analyst who inherited my projects? Good kid, completely innocent in all of this. When the dust settled, leadership needed someone to rebuild the department's credibility. Someone with a track record who'd shown judgment under pressure. They offered me Daniel's job, regional director, a 30% raise, and the office where I'd once watched him smirk across the table. I sat in that chair on my first day, and I'm not going to lie to you. It felt like justice. If you take one thing from this story, take this. When someone powerful tries to bury you, don't fight with emotion. Fight with documentation, dates, records, receipts. The truth doesn't need you to be loud, it needs you to be ready. Daniel had charm, a title, and a head start. I had a folder, the folder 1. If you've ever been targeted at work for knowing too much, tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one, and the best ones might become future episodes. Hit subscribe if you believe karma needs a little paperwork. New justice stories every week. This has been Justice Stories. The receipts always win.